This woman married an old man for the sake of honor and fortune. During the day, she acts like she's in love with her husband. But at night, when she goes to bed, her husband's farting filled her with rage. She looked at the man in front of her with disgust and angrily poured herself a glass of red wine. Then she took out her cell phone and started looking through her stepson Michael's photos, as if his handsome face was the only thing that could comfort her at the moment. The woman's name is Dongmi. When she found out that her stepson was coming over for lunch, she prepares a big lunch in the kitchen. When her husband saw this, he praised her for being a good wife. Hearing her husband's praise, Dongmi felt even happier. After preparing lunch, she went to her room to put on her makeup. The moment she put on her hairpin, she instantly felt 10 years younger. When her stepson saw her, he would definitely look at her. Her efforts had not been in vain. Michael couldn't help but praise her beautiful stepmother. Although Dongmi is modest on the surface, but Michael's compliments made her happy. At the dinner table, she prepared all of Michael's favorite foods. Even her husband commented on the care taken in preparing the meal today. Especially the spicy chicken was praised by her stepson. The husband asked his wife to teach his daughter-in-law how to cook, but Dongmi said that even her daughter-in-law won't share her secret recipes. This immediately made everyone laugh. After the dinner, Michael leaves because he has to work. At that moment, the new nanny of the family comes to work. She mistook her stepson for the man of the house. She then praised Dongmi. The husband was not happy to hear this. He accused the nanny of not guessing about other people's relationships. On her first day at work, she left a bad impression, which made the nanny feel uneasy. But Dongmi was happy to hear that. She was afraid that her husband would be angry about what had just happened, so she pretended to comfort him. She even offered to customize a wig for him. She thought he would look younger with a wig. That day, Dongmi was watching an interview on a health program. She overheard that if the elderly don't pay attention to a proper diet, long-term use of high sugar, high-calorie foods can lead to cardiovascular disease, even life-threatening. So she took it to heart. So the next morning, she prepared a bowl of red bean congee for her husband. She even added sweet dumplings to it. Seeing her wife prepare breakfast so early in the morning, her husband was touched that she didn't know about it. Dongmi ate the carrots and secretly cursed at her husband. The husband was satisfied with the congee, so he decided to fulfill his wife's wish. But Dongmi pretended that all she wanted was her husband's heart. Listening to his wife's sweet words, the husband was instantly touched. After breakfast, the husband went to the restroom when he heard a farting sound in the toilet. The wife was so angry that she cursed her husband because her stepmother's spicy chicken was to her husband's liking. So daughter-in-law Linda bought the ingredients to learn from her mother-in-law's method. Naturally, she didn't want to teach her stepson's favorite food, but she couldn't resist her daughter-in-law's determination to learn. She had no choice but to mess up the order of the food and put the seasonings in a messy way on purpose. She was afraid that after Linda learned this spicy chicken, her stepson would not come to eat with her. However, Linda could see her mother-in-law's little thoughts. After dinner, she deliberately packed up all the leftover spicy chicken. Then she took her daughter home in a hurry. But when Dongmi saw that her daughter-in-law had packed away all the remaining chicken, she felt something was wrong. She was in a bad mood because of this. She didn't want her stepson to know that she had failed in making spicy chicken. At that moment, her husband came into the bathroom to take a dump as usual. Dongmi hated him so much when she saw his face. She wished her husband would die. It turns out she's been secretly in love with her handsome young stepson all these years. But she only dared to keep the secret in her heart. She could only pretend to be in love with her husband. Even in the middle of the night, she would buy her husband greasy snacks. She lied that she was hungry and asked her husband to eat with her. In fact, she wanted her husband to eat more high-sugar and high-fat food to cause cardiovascular disease, while she only ate a little. Watching her husband eat all the greasy food, Dongmi was so excited that she imagined her husband having an attack. But after he finished eating, he started farting again. A series of farting noises disturbed Dongmi. She doesn't know when this breakdown will end. She has no choice but to watch health videos, listening to the experts talk about the types of food for chronic viruses, while eating healthy and nutritious beef caviar for her own health. The next day, the couple arranged to go swimming with their son, but her husband couldn't make it. Dongmi was surprised to hear that. She could finally be alone with her stepson again. Dongmi and her stepson are having fun in the pool. They look like a loving couple. After the swim, Dongmi once again showed off her beautiful body in front of her stepson. The stepson took the opportunity to praise his stepmother's body, so he wants his wife to learn how to swim too. Swimming is the best way to stay in shape. But Dongmi didn't want her daughter-in-law to interfere with her time alone with her stepson. She purposely explained that her daughter-in-law was too busy to overwork her, and she didn't keep her body in shape by swimming. And she boasted that she had always been naturally beautiful. On this day, Dongmi brought her husband to swim again. but she didn't find her husband at the end of the swim. So she looked around the swimming pool. She asked the staff and said she didn't see him. At first, Dongmi thought her husband had just left, until the staff told her there was a man floating in the pool. She was so scared that she jumped into the water and tried to pull her husband out. But in the end, her husband was confirmed dead. Dongmi cried tears of joy. She sneaked into the bath and laughed. She finally got her wish, but she didn't realize that it was all just a dream. Her husband was still alive. At this moment, Dongmi's mood changed for the worse. Her husband asked her what kind of dream she had just had. Dongmi explained that she had dreamt of winning the lottery. Then she asked her husband what he wanted to eat for dinner, but her husband said he could make anything. At that moment, someone suddenly rang the doorbell. Dongmi greeted him excitedly. It's the stepson she's been longing for who's here again. It turns out Michael came to bring her skincare products this time. Looking at the expensive gifts, Dongmi was in a great mood. She didn't expect her stepson to be so generous to her, so she felt that she would have rewarded her son with a kiss in the past. That this kiss is just a fantasy. After all, she's just a stepmother who has to be careful in order for Michael to come home more often. Every time she tried to prepare a delicious meal for him, seeing the skincare products sent by the man she loves, Dongmi knew that her stepson must value their relationship. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sent her such an expensive gift. Because she's in a good mood, she suggests taking her husband out to the movies. She said it's been a long time since they went out on a date, so they went to the movie theater. They were envious of the young people eating popcorn and drinking Coke, so they ate popcorn and Coke like the young people. They even chose to watch a funny comedy, and the two of them were very happy when they snuggled together. Just when the couple was laughing at the movie's plot, the husband suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest. He realized he was having a heart attack, so he pulled his wife's arm for help. But Dongmi saw this but turned a blind eye. At that moment, the husband saw his wife's true face. He realized that his wife's love for him was all a disguise. The husband died of disappointment. Dongmi shed tears of emotion after seeing her husband die. The dream she had been longing for had finally come true. She no longer has to serve this disgusting old man. After losing the best chance to save her life, Dongmi pretended to run to the front desk to ask for help. Because he missed the time to save him, the old man was pronounced dead when he was taken to the hospital. When his stepson and daughter-in-law arrived at the hospital, the daughter-in-law saw her mother-in-law's behavior was a bit strange, but she sympathized with the pain of losing her husband. The next day, the family held a funeral for the old man, but Dongmi's act couldn't end there. Every day, she pretended in front of her family that she couldn't go on living. She wouldn't eat or drink, and she had to be put in a hangman's bottle. She agonized that she couldn't accept her husband's death. Her daughter-in-law also feels sorry for her, but she didn't know how to comfort her. However, Dongmi was in pain when there were people around. When there's only one person, she's back to her old self. She looked in the mirror and admired her face. She's satisfied with her acting these days. When she saw someone coming from the toilet, she pretended to be weak again. Michael was worried that his stepmother wouldn't be able to cope. He sent her home immediately after the funeral. But Dongmi took the opportunity to fall into Michael's arms. This intimate scene surprised her daughter-in-law because she was afraid that her mother-in-law would suddenly faint. The son and daughter-in-law helped her home as much as they could, but as soon as she entered the house, Dongmi fell into her stepson's arms. She said she didn't know how to live without her husband. The daughter-in-law felt sorry for her mother-in-law, so she offered to stay and take care of her tonight. But Dongmi only wants her stepson to stay, but she was too embarrassed to ask, so she asked them all to leave. It was only at night that Dongmi stopped her performance. She glared at the old man's picture. Then she opened the curtains and admired the moonlight outside. At that moment, she felt that she had finally been reborn. The next day, her stepson came to visit her at home. When Dongmi heard the voice, she pretended to be sad again. She told her stepson not to care about her. She can take care of herself. Michael offered to take her out for a walk. Dongmi was thrilled to hear that. She pretended not to be in the mood to go, but she's already happily planning what to wear. She woke up and put on some makeup. She's going to wear her best dress to go on a date with her stepson. Because her husband had just died, she couldn't show too much excitement, so she kept her joy to herself the whole time. At the coffee shop, she said it was her first time in this place, because her husband liked to stay at home. Her words made Michael feel that his father owed his stepmother a debt of gratitude, so he held his stepmother's hand and comforted her, and said he would take good care of his stepmother. But the scene of their handshake was seen by his wife's friend, so the friend didn't hesitate to send it to Linda. Linda didn't think much of it after seeing the photo. She thought it was her husband's way of caring for her mother-in-law, so when her husband came home, Linda didn't ask too many questions, because the date had put her stepmother in a good mood. As she lay in the bathtub, she recalled what her stepson had said to her at dinner. She could see that her stepson cared about her. This made Dongmi smile in triumph. The next day, Michael came to visit her as usual, but the maid told him that his stepmother was taking a bath. Michael was afraid that something would happen to his stepmother because he had waited too long outside, so he broke into the bathroom to see what was going on. When he called out, he didn't hear any response from his stepmother. Michael had to go up to her to see if she was sick. Seeing that her body temperature was normal, he tried to shake her awake. Then Dongmi slowly opened her eyes and pretended to be weak. Michael was ready to take her to the hospital, but Dongmi said she was fine. She explained that she was usually with her husband at this time of the day, listening to music and chatting, but now her husband is not there. Michael took out his cell phone and played music, so Dongmi enjoys the music while taking a bath. Her stepson also accompanied her and chatted with her. Michael told her how kind his stepmother was to him when he was a child. I don't know how long the conversation lasted. His stepson was worried that the bath water would get cold, so he added hot water to her bath. Dongmi was already ecstatic when she saw the man's gesture. She wished that time could last forever. But the beauty was interrupted by the nanny of the house. She had to send her stepson out to check on him. After Michael left, Dongmi smiled in triumph. For the rest of his life, Michael took his stepmother for a walk. He wanted her to forget her pain and get back on her feet. After they walked for a while, his stepson offered to carry her on his back. Dongmi wanted to do it, but in the end, she refused. Michael simply took his stepmother's hand. At this moment, Dongmi looked like a shy little woman. They not only ate ice cream together, but even took pictures together. Dongmi wanted to save her most beautiful scene in Michael's cell phone. However, his wife's mother saw them on a date. She didn't expect her son-in-law to be so close to her stepmother, and they were dressed like a couple because she was worried about her daughter's marriage. The mother told her daughter about it. She thought there was something wrong with the way her son-in-law and his stepmother were getting along, but Linda thought it was normal. No matter how much her mother reminded her, Linda felt that her mother was too paranoid. Although Linda refuted her mother's suspicions, but she also had doubts about her husband's relationship with her stepmother. That's why she peeked at her husband's cell phone while he was in the bathroom. There was nothing unusual in the text messages, but the intimate photos in the photo album made Linda feel uneasy. But she didn't question her husband about it. She just pretended that nothing had happened. After all, it's too early to draw any conclusions, because today's date had put her in a good mood. As she lay in bed, she remembered the day's date and wished she could have this kind of time alone more often. Sure enough, the next day, her stepson came to have dinner with her as promised. Seeing her stepson eating her delicious food, Dongmi felt so happy. However, they didn't expect their daughter-in-law to arrive at that moment. As soon as she walked into the living room, she saw the clothes her husband had left behind. It turned out that her husband had stayed out at night to keep his stepmother company. But what she saw next surprised her even more. She saw her husband feeding her food into her stepmother's mouth. She was shocked by this intimate gesture, but Linda didn't want her mother-in-law to notice. She could only pretend to be indifferent and greeted them. Then she sat down and ate with them. She complimented her mother-in-law on how much better she was at cooking. No wonder her husband loved it so much. After the meal, the couple drove home in their own cars. But Linda didn't want to stop there. When she got home, she started packing for her man, and then she told him to move in with his stepmother. It saved him a lot of trouble. When the husband heard this, he realized that his wife had misunderstood him. He tried to explain, but Linda stopped him. Michael knew that this time he had really angered his wife. He explained why he did it. After all, his stepmother had been really good to him. If it wasn't for his stepmother, he wouldn't have had such a happy childhood. So he was thankful for all that she had done for him. Michael then hugged his wife and apologized, and promised he'd be more careful in the future. Linda finally forgave her husband. On the other hand, Dongmi was so happy about her new swimsuit that she couldn't sleep, so she got up in the middle of the night and wore it again. When the time comes, she'd be able to wear this swimsuit in front of her stepson. But when she arrived at the swimming pool in high spirits, Dongmi realized that her stepson didn't show up as promised. He didn't even come back for dinner for the next few days. At this moment, Dongmi became anxious. She had no choice but to pretend to be sick and let her stepson come to visit her. Instead, she waited for a long time and found her daughter-in-law and granddaughter. This moment instantly drove Dongmi mad. She could only ask her daughter-in-law Michael why she didn't come along. Linda knew right away that her mother-in-law was faking her illness, but she didn't say anything. She explained that her husband was too busy with his work. Upon hearing this, Dongmi started pretending to be weak again. Unable to stand it, Linda asked if she wanted to make congee for her. The daughter-in-law's sudden change of subject showed her mother-in-law what she was thinking. Although Linda knew that the old woman was pretending to be sick, she made congee and brought it to her room. She said that if she didn't eat for a long time, she would become ugly. Dongmi was so scared that she got up to eat, but when she thought she was still pretending to be sick, she couldn't show that she had an appetite. She could only urge her daughter-in-law to leave first. At that moment, the bell outside the door suddenly rang. Dongmi's eyes lit up when she heard the sound. She knew it was her stepson coming to see her. so Dongmi hurriedly put the food on the bedside. She adjusted the white cloth on her head and pretended to lie down, thinking that her stepson had finally arrived. Unexpectedly, Michael didn't show up, but invited his doctor colleague to the house to see her. Linda was delighted to see her husband so attentive, so she enthusiastically took the man to her mother-in-law's room. At this moment, Dongmi wanted to die. What broke her heart was that her daughter-in-law showed her a message from Michael saying that she was too busy to come over. Seeing that her work was more important than herself, Dongmi's mood dropped to the bottom. So she showed her true colors and asked her daughter-in-law to leave. She explained that there was nothing wrong with her health. Linda knew what her mother-in-law was up to, so she didn't pay any attention to her. Dongmi guessed that it was all her daughter-in-law's fault, so she kept the hatred in her heart. In order to make Michael come to visit her at home, she purposely didn't answer his calls. Only by doing so could Michael come to visit her. Sure enough, in the evening, Michael called again. At this moment, Dongmi answered the phone with anxiety. It turned out that Michael had come to her stepmother's house to take her out for dinner, but Dongmi lied that she was not at home. But Michael opened the gate and found his stepmother's car, so he guessed that Dongmi hadn't gone out. Seeing that her little trick had finally worked, she ran to her room to fix her makeup. She wanted to look her best in front of her stepson. Michael thought his stepmother was still feverish and went to check her temperature, but Dongmi was not happy about it and told him to go home to be with his wife. She was upset and had a temper tantrum. Michael could see that his stepmother was angry with him for not coming in time, so he told Dongmi to hide and play hide-and-seek with him, because that's how his stepmother used to amuse him when he was a child. So the two adults played hide-and-seek. Michael searched from upstairs to downstairs without finding Dongmi, but he didn't know that Dongmi was hiding in the closet of his room because she was playing hide-and-seek with the man she loved. Dongmi is very excited right now. She is looking forward to Michael's face when he catches her. After searching around, Michael finally came to the bedroom. He searched the cupboards one by one. When he came to the middle cabinet, he saw Dongmi's hiding place. Soon after Dongmi's death, her husband's ghost came back. Because he died unwillingly, he took revenge on his wife in this way. When he came to the kitchen, he looked at the snacks on the table and tasted one. He didn't expect it to taste the same as his wife's. After eating and drinking, the old man sat down in his own living room, but his ghost was seen by the nanny. The nanny rushed to tell Dongmi about it, but Dongmi doesn't believe in ghosts. She thought the nanny was hallucinating, but the nanny wanted to quit because she was scared. Dongmi wanted to keep the nanny working. She offered her a raise in salary. Finally, the nanny stayed, but the next day, the nanny saw the old man's ghost again. She told Dongmi that the old man was sitting on the sofa staring at them. Because of this, Dongmi raised the nanny's salary again. She thought the nanny was too weak and that's why it happened. But it happened twice in a row. The nanny was convinced that what she saw was the truth. Because of this incident, the nanny finally quit her job. I didn't expect Dongmi to be happy instead of anxious. After all, she finally found a suitable reason to stay at her stepson's house. So that night, Dongmi came to Michael's house in a panic. She told her stepson that the nanny had quit, because the nanny had seen ghosts in the living room several times. Now she's afraid to live alone because of this incident. At night, she felt a creepy feeling that something was making noise in the room. However, Dongmi made up all these words. She wanted to use this as an excuse to get her stepson to take her in. As expected, Michael immediately agreed to let her move in with him. Dongmi was in a difficult situation, but she finally agreed. After the first step, the next step was to become the mistress of the house. So the first day she moved in, she took over the kitchen. When she saw her daughter-in-law getting up to make breakfast, Dongmi urged Linda to catch up on her sleep. She said she'd make breakfast from now on. The daughter-in-law didn't think much of it. So Dongmi made a table of her favorite food for everyone early in the morning. She knew that food was the only thing that would keep her in the family. So when she got home, she started packing. She even brought a picture of her late husband with her. After all, sometimes this photo can come in handy. Then Dongmi prepared a big dinner at home. She wanted to treat her husband well before she left. Then she began to talk to her invisible husband. She hoped that he would let go of his grudge and leave. Since Dongmi moved in with her son and daughter-in-law, she not only has to take care of her granddaughter, she also had to watch the couple show their love in front of her. She was jealous of them. She doesn't want to give up the man she loves. She wanted to have a taste of this kind of happiness. In the following days, Dongmi deliberately treated her daughter-in-law as a friend. He tried to please her as much as he could. After some time, Linda let go of her guard against her mother-in-law. So when Dongmi brought her lemon tea and asked her to taste it, Linda gratefully accepted the tea and drank it. She didn't realize that her mother-in-law had put sleeping pills in the water. Soon Linda fell asleep. Dongmi guessed that the drug had taken effect and slowly pushed open the door. She was relieved to see her daughter-in-law completely asleep, because she had to start preparing for the action. Dongmi laid down on the sofa, but she didn't think she was pretty enough. She lifted up her skirt and showed her long legs to let her stepson see her sexy body. As soon as Michael came back, he saw Dongmi on the couch. Michael was worried that his stepmother would catch cold, so he tried to wake her up. But Dongmi, who was pretending to be asleep, didn't want to wake up, so Michael took Dongmi into his arms and took her to bed. Who knows that such a beautiful picture was actually imagined by Dongmi? Michael didn't take her to the bedroom when he got home. He just put a blanket over her and left in a hurry. Dongmi was disappointed that he didn't fulfill her expectations. She thought something good would happen when they entered the room, but her dream came to naught. Dongmi had no choice but to implement a second plan. When her daughter-in-law was not at home, she deliberately offered to squeeze Michael's shoulders to relieve his fatigue. With her skillful technique, Michael instantly felt sleepy. He fell asleep in a few minutes, so Dongmi's hands began to get restless. But all this was seen by her deceased husband. The old man realized that his wife had been thinking about his son, so he possessed his son's body. Dongmi looked at the sleeping Michael and began to have an evil thought. She tried to touch Michael's face, but she couldn't. After some hesitation, she decided to take advantage of him. Just when Dongmi was about to succeed, the bell at the door suddenly rang. Dongmi was so scared that she rushed out to check the situation. When she opened the door, she realized it was her daughter-in-law returning with her granddaughter. Linda didn't understand why her mother-in-law locked the door in the daytime. Dongmi could only say that she didn't know, and asked Linda why she came back today. Otherwise, she could have prepared lunch earlier. When she found out that they had already eaten out, she was immediately upset. They could have stayed out longer but had to come back to ruin her day. I thought Michael was just being pushed around by a perverted stepmother. I didn't realize he had another girlfriend. Carla, that day, Linda's female coworker suddenly asked her out. To tell her the hard truth, her husband was riding with a young girl in a horse farm, and the two of them were behaving very intimately, so the coworker wanted her to keep an eye on her husband. Linda had mixed feelings when she heard this. As she sat in the car, she remembered a girl wearing the same dress as Michael, because that down jacket was a limited edition. You can't even get a second one in the whole of Korea. Now that a strange girl is wearing the same clothes, it makes her suspicious. After all, her husband gave the jacket to a friend. Is that girl her friend? That's when her husband called. He said he was going to the horse farm to practice again. Linda's heart felt like a knife in her chest. Is it possible that that place was their date? In order to verify her suspicion, Linda planned to go to the horse farm to find out the truth. She couldn't believe that a man who loved her so much would suddenly change his mind. And her husband couldn't have done it either. Michael, unaware of this, came into the stable's locker room, and then another woman followed, because this was the safest place to meet. Soon Linda arrived at the stables, but to her surprise, there was no other woman with her husband. It turns out that Michael had brought his girlfriend, Carla, back to the track for another date just 5 minutes earlier. At that moment, Carla suddenly received an urgent phone call, so she left the stable in a hurry. Linda rushed to the scene, so she didn't catch her husband cheating on her, but she didn't let that dissuade her from her suspicions. At least she knew her husband was up to something. That's why she secretly watched his every move. Michael was so upset that his wife almost caught him in the act. He knew there was no way to keep this a secret, so he rushed to Carl and asked her to break up with him. In the end, he gave his girlfriend a luxury car as compensation for the time he spent with her. However, Carla had already fallen in love with Michael during the relationship. She couldn't let go of him. Carla always thought that her boyfriend would divorce and marry her. She didn't realize that she would be the one left behind. She was so depressed that she spent her days drinking and getting drunk. She ended up in the hospital because she was so upset. Michael wanted to prevent his wife from being disappointed in their marriage. He bought late-night snacks to please the two women in the family. He acted like a good son and a good husband. Sure enough, his wife no longer had any doubts about him. She even made a show of herself in front of her husband that night, listening to her son and daughter-in-law flirting happily in the next room. The stepmother stayed in her room and fantasized that she was the woman in there, because her dancing shouldn't be bad. But it's a pity that there's no man to enjoy her dancing. In order to be alone with her stepson again, Dongmi had to give her daughter-in-law sleeping pills again, and gave Linda a taste of rice wine. The daughter-in-law didn't think twice about drinking it, but then the husband suddenly called. He said he was going to a mysterious place with his wife, so Linda left the house without drinking the rice wine. At this moment, Dongmi was not happy. The reason why Michael asked his wife to the hotel, the purpose is to make up for his previous mistakes. After all, he couldn't abandon his wife, so he could only use this way to cultivate a relationship with his wife. When Dongmi saw that her son and daughter-in-law hadn't come home, she broke into their bedroom. She touched the soft bed and suddenly had an evil thought. So the mother-in-law lay down on the bed, where her daughter-in-law slept, and experienced what it was like to sleep on the bed. Unaware of this, Linda treated her mother-in-law as her best friend. She didn't know that her mother-in-law had been watching her and her husband's every move. That day, Linda received a call from her aunt. It turned out that her mother had cancer and had been sent to the hospital, so Linda rushed over to visit her mother. After the doctor's diagnosis, she realized that her mother didn't have much time left. Linda got settled in the hospital and tried to talk to her husband. She asked the nurses and found out that Michael was in VIP room number 3. His girlfriend, Carla, had been hospitalized for alcohol poisoning. Michael broke up with her, but he wanted to take care of her and get her out of the hospital. But while they were talking in the ward, they didn't know that Linda was coming. When she arrived at Ward 3, she was shocked to see a scene. She didn't realize that her husband was holding a patient in his arms, and they were acting very close to each other. Linda fainted on the spot because she couldn't accept this fact. After she woke up, she didn't reveal the truth. She held back her anger in order to see what the woman her husband was seeing looked like. Linda took the flowers and went to the hospital again that day. She asked the nurse for the patient's name and then barged into the ward. The moment she saw Carla, she suddenly remembered something. She had seen this girl a year ago. She was wearing the same dress as her husband, and it caught her attention. She didn't realize that this woman was Michael's girlfriend. At the time, her husband lied and said he gave the dress to a classmate. It's ironic when I think about it now. It turns out that her husband has been cheating on her for more than a year. They used to be so in love, but in the end, it was all just an illusion. So Linda looked at her sleeping daughter in pain. If she separates from her husband, will the child be hurt? Should she hold back on this? After all, the child's future and happiness is more important. But because she couldn't get over that hurdle in her heart, Linda went to the court and filed for divorce papers. On the same day, she proposed to her husband to send the child to the United States to study. She would go there to take care of her daughter. But Michael refused his wife's proposal. He thought that the couple should not choose to live in two places. After a long time, their relationship will fade. He likes to live happily as a family of 3. Just as he was about to embrace his wife, she pushed him away because his wife's behavior today made him angry. He thought he hadn't done anything wrong and didn't deserve to be treated like that. Hearing this, Linda didn't want to talk too much to him. She got dressed and asked her husband to take her somewhere. Michael was happy because he thought his wife was going out on a date with her. But when he got in the car, he realized she was going to Carla's house. She forced her husband to give her the address of her girlfriend's house. Michael was terrified when his wife found out he was cheating on her. All he could do was explain that Carla was just a patient of his. How could his wife believe his lies? So she threatened Michael with divorce or a visit to Carla's house. Then she pulled out the divorce papers and told him to make a choice. Michael had no choice but to get back in the car, but he tried to put up a defense that his infidelity was an accident and that he shouldn't have to go to someone else's house to get into trouble for something so trivial. Seeing that his wife insisted on asking for his girlfriend's address, Michael had to take her to their neighborhood. Upstairs, Michael skillfully unlocked the code to his girlfriend's door. As soon as Linda entered, she took a look around the room. Carla was shocked when she saw Linda, so she hurried to her room to change her clothes. But Linda didn't make a scene this time. She just asked how far they'd gotten. When she found out that they had been in love for a year, Linda was heartbroken, and that Carla was 16 years younger than her husband. They fell in love at first sight on an airplane. When Linda found out what happened, she decided to divorce her husband. This time, she wanted to fulfill their love. She gave Carla this scumbag. After saying that, she left the scene in a huff, although Linda was very calm on the spot. But after all, she shed tears and couldn't forgive her husband for what he had done. This ironic marriage came to an end. When Linda got home, she told her mother-in-law that the couple was getting a divorce. Donmi was overjoyed to hear this, but on the surface, she advised her daughter-in-law not to be impulsive. But when her daughter-in-law said that her husband had a girlfriend outside, Dongmi instantly lost her composure. She asked her stepson if it was true. When she got the affirmation, Dongmi's heart dropped to the bottom. It's as if she's the one who's been abandoned. Dongmi hopes that her daughter-in-law won't let Carla go so easily. The two of them should be united and go out to settle the score with that woman. But Linda was no longer in the mood to keep her husband. Since he's in love with someone else, it's fine if she doesn't want him. But how could Dongmi let Carla go so easily? So she called the hospital to ask for the woman's home address. But at Michael's request, the nurse didn't give any information. In order to save his marriage, Michael had to ask Carla to come to his home to explain to Linda, and asked Carla to lie and say they were just friends. He explained that he was trying to stabilize his wife so that he could move his assets first. After the matter is settled, he will get a divorce to marry her. As long as she did what he wanted her to do, it would be a happy ending for both of them. Carla took Michael's word for it and agreed. She went to the door with Michael for her own happiness. She tried to explain that they were really just friends. But the moment the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law saw Carla, their eyes sharpened. Originally, they were planning to settle the score with Carla. Now that she came to the door, of course they had to show her some color. So as soon as Dongmi saw Carla, he wanted to fight with her. Linda didn't take part in this situation. After being pushed away by Michael, Dongmi felt more and more angry. She couldn't help but slap Michael directly. She broke down and said she hadn't taught Michael well. Michael explained that people misunderstood them. He and Carla were just close siblings. They've never done anything untoward to each other. Carla also desperately tried to explain that what Michael said was true. Because her parents are living in America, she had no one to turn to in Korea, so she thought of Michael as her brother. Linda didn't believe her and wanted to check her cell phone. Looking at Carla's guilty look, Linda already had an answer in her heart. She knew that this woman must have followed her husband's orders. So when Michael tried to explain, even her stepmother saw the problem, so she threw a drink in Carla's face. She even took a bottle and tried to hit Carla's head with it. Dong-mi acted as if she was the victim. After all, she couldn't accept that her stepson had found such a young girl. Michael was worried that if the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law continued to press the issue, the truth would be revealed. He told Carla to leave first. But how could Linda let her go so easily? She wanted to check Carla's cell phone before she would give up. Just as Dong-mi tried to pass the phone, Michael grabbed it in time. After all, the cell phone is full of messages between the two of them. But Michael's behavior confirmed his wife's thoughts. Since we are a couple, there's no need to pretend to be brother and sister. So Linda told Michael to meet her at the courthouse at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. The marriage is over. At this moment, Dong-mi is feeling desperate. It turns out that she's already fallen out of love before the relationship even started. Michael knows that his wife is not happy with him. In order to give each other some time, he took his luggage and planned to move out. He didn't explain anything to Linda, but there's no way this marriage can end. Dong-mi told his daughter-in-law to get over it. If she chooses to divorce, she loses to Carla. But at this point, Linda doesn't care who wins or loses. Now she just wants to take her daughter and leave his world forever. But even though she pretended not to care, but when she thinks of how much she used to love her husband, she is still sad. It turns out that men forget their old love when they have a new one. And Dong-mi is not feeling any better. When she thinks of her stepson and Carla hugging, she loses control of her emotions. Since her daughter-in-law won't come after her, she'd have to do it herself. So the next day Dong-mi packed her bags and said goodbye to her daughter-in-law. She explained that she'd go home first and tie her stepson to her, and then she'd do everything she could to break them up, and told her daughter-in-law to wait for her good news. Linda didn't think twice about letting her mother-in-law go home, but Dong-mi did it all for herself. But when she got home, she was shocked. She didn't realize that Carla had moved in before her, and she left her luggage in the living room. It's obvious that she's planning to stay here permanently. So Dong-mi was so angry that she started to lose her temper on the spot, and asked Carla to get out of the house. Carla had planned to live with Michael. Now she's suddenly being kicked out, so she refuses to leave. When Dong-mi heard this, she felt that Carla deserved to be beaten up, but her stepson stopped her in time. At this moment, Dong-mi's mood instantly dropped to the bottom. She didn't expect the man she cared about to help an outsider. Carla knew Michael would be on her side, so she followed Michael's side and begged for protection. That's the only way Dong-mi would dare to do anything to her. But Dong-mi couldn't let Carla stay here so easily, so he decided to throw out all of Carla's luggage. No matter what Carla said, Dong-mi refused. Seeing that her future mother-in-law is determined to throw her out of the house, Carla started to put on a show. She sat on the floor and bawled her eyes out, pretending to be pitiful. This time, Dong-mi had finally met her match. She had no choice but to turn to her stepson, but Michael didn't say a word the whole time. Carla begged her mother-in-law not to kick her out of the house. She would be a good daughter-in-law in the future. When Michael nodded, Dong-mi agreed to let her stay, but she would have plenty of chances to teach this wretched woman a lesson. The next day, Dong-mi gave the nanny a long vacation so that she could take some time off before coming back to work, because she believed that she could kick Carla out of the house within 10 days. But the next day, Dong-mi was furious when she found out that Carla was sleeping with Michael. She had no choice but to give Carla a hard time in the kitchen. She said she would prepare all the meals for her. Carla not only didn't refuse, but also happily did it. She even complained about her mother-in-law's food not being fresh. Seeing Carla deliberately picking on Dong-mi, she was at a loss for words. In the evening, Dong-mi managed to prepare a table full of food, but Carla said Michael won't come back for dinner tonight. Dong-mi got upset when she heard that. She asked Carla why she didn't tell her in advance, but Carla replied, "You didn't ask me either." Dong-mi was so angry that she was speechless. At the dinner table, Carla praised her mother-in-law's cooking. Dong-mi was not happy to hear that. After all, this is the dinner she prepared for her stepson, and now this wretched woman is putting it all in her mouth. Her mother-in-law lost her appetite when she saw this. Dong-mi finally got a chance to be alone with Michael after work, but before they could talk, Carla came over to mess things up. She took the lip balm and said she wanted to rub it for her mother-in-law. She thinks she should take care of herself at her age. Dongmi was furious when she heard that. She hated being called old. Angrily, she rushed to her room to vent her frustration. Michael had to kneel in front of Linda and beg for forgiveness in order to save his marriage. He thought that if he sincerely apologized, the couple wouldn't get divorced. But Michael underestimated Linda's determination to get a divorce, because the more they loved each other, the more they hated each other. Even if she forgave her husband, there would still be a gap between them. But Michael thinks he only made a small mistake. He even thinks that his wife has nothing to lose. As long as he returns to his family, he will never make the same mistake again, and their child won't be harmed. For the sake of her daughter's childhood, she should also choose to tolerate it. But Linda insisted on divorce. Michael knew he couldn't save the marriage anymore. Finally, he left tears of remorse and apologized to his wife again. Although they were no longer husband and wife, they wanted to be friends. A mistake made by one person ends up being painful for both of them. After all, Michael was a good husband before the affair. Unfortunately, everything is not the way it used to be. Because the couple hadn't filed for divorce yet, Michael often came back to spend the night in the name of watching the kids. Linda had to put up with it for the sake of her daughter. At least she can't disclose to the child that they're getting divorced, so she pretended to cooperate with him as if nothing had happened. Ever since Carl and Michael moved in together, she thinks she's the mistress of the house, and her boyfriend's love made her feel confident. The two of them thought they would be happy without the gossip of others. But Michael, who hadn't dissolved his marriage, didn't think so, because he still has a place for his wife in his heart. So when he saw Linda sitting and chatting with another man, he couldn't accept the fact, so he greeted them with a jealous look on his face. Linda deliberately introduced her male colleagues. She even generously offered Carla a cup of coffee. He saw his wife's indifference. Michael felt bad about it. After everyone entered the movie theater, Linda sat next to her male colleague. At this moment, Michael's heart began to feel bad again. At this point, his girlfriend even said that the man next to Linda looked very attractive. No wonder his wife went to the movies with such a nice guy. Hearing this, Michael's feelings became even more complicated. After the movie, the male colleague offered to take Linda home, but the husband saw them getting into the car. At this moment, Michael became jealous again, because he remembered the scene in the car after the movie with his wife. The way they loved each other was so nostalgic. Unhappy, Michael drank alone. He was so angry that he couldn't sleep at night. He couldn't accept the image of his wife with a male colleague. So on that date, Michael went to Linda again. He accused his wife of divorcing him because of another man. Linda was furious when she heard that. After all, it's the husband who's at fault and he's blaming himself. And he was living with Carla in name only. But Michael thought Linda had been having an affair with a coworker for a long time. Seeing that Michael is such a scoundrel, Linda didn't want to talk to him anymore, so she planned to leave. But Michael stopped her and used the child as an excuse. He thought that his wife only cared about her relationship and didn't care about their daughter. In that case, he'd like to get custody of the child back. He believed Carla would be a good mother. Linda was so angry, she slapped him in the face. Because of this incident, the two of them ended up in a bad situation. Michael realized that he had misunderstood his wife, so he bowed his head and apologized to Linda. In the following days, Michael was absent-minded every day. He always fantasizes about Linda taking her daughter on a date with another man. But Michael was always thinking about his wife and didn't know that Carla and Dongmi were fighting again. They both think they're the woman Michael cares about the most. Dongmi was not convinced and she was ready to throw her soup and rice at the other woman. But she underestimated Carla, and they started to fight. Neither of them would let the other go, so they started to fight each other. But Dongmi underestimated the young man. Soon she was defeated. What's worse, Carla complained to Michael first, because Carla was crying so sadly and aggressively. Michael doesn't know what to do with these two women. Just then Dongmi came back from the hospital after seeing the doctor. When she saw that her son had come home, she immediately complained about Carla's cruelty. Not only did she knock out 2 of her teeth, she even beat her hand so much that it swelled up. What's worse is that she didn't even spare her face. But before Dongmi could finish her complaint, Carla was back on her game. Because both women demanded justice from Michael. They even want to kick one of them out of the house. Michael is so upset by this situation. He's not in the mood for this anymore, seeing that he was no match for Carla after all. The next day, the mother-in-law rushed to her ex-daughter-in-law, and right away, she complained to Linda about Carla's cruelty, that she had no respect for the elderly. It looked like there was no way she could get this woman out of the house, so she hopes Linda will forgive Michael and remarry him. Then that woman will be no match for us. But Linda knows that her ex-mother-in-law is not a good person. Naturally, she won't agree to remarry her ex-husband to help her deal with Carla. She even wants these two women to fight to the death. Seeing that Linda has left herself out of the picture, Dongmi has no choice. She can only deal with that bad woman on her own. Unfortunately, Carla is a very good camouflage girl. Yesterday she fought with Dongmi. Today, she's buying tonic for the old man, in front of her boyfriend. She's acting like she's pleasing her mother-in-law. Donmi knows Carla's hypocrisy, but she can't do anything about it. After all, she can't vent her anger in front of her son. Since she can't beat her, she has to learn to be patient. That day, Linda brought her daughter to the swimming pool to exercise, and she met her male colleague here, so the two of them sat down to say hello. But Michael happened to see this scene. Seeing that they seemed to be whispering to each other, Michael was so angry that he punched the man on the spot. However, this dominating image was only in Michael's imagination. After all, he was in no position to stop his wife from having contact with the opposite sex, because the three men in front of him were sitting together like a family. Michael left the scene in shame to vent his anger. He didn't realize he'd lost the woman he loved after all. He followed his wife and child as they got into someone else's car. Michael wanted to see how far they'd gotten. But the three of them got out of the car and came to a restaurant. They brought their kids with them. So Michael was watching his wife and kids like a surveillance camera. What he couldn't accept was that his daughter seemed to like her uncle, and the picture of them sitting together was very cozy. Michael can only leave the scene in anger because he feels bad. On the other hand, Donmi was upset by Carla's provocation. She couldn't let Carla come in front of her again. She couldn't stand it any longer and finally decided to fight back. So the next day, Donmi signed up for a boxing class. She was ready to take revenge on Carl after practicing. While she was practicing hard, she suddenly saw the man on the stage. At this moment, Donmi was instantly enamored. She didn't know when she would have such a husband. Since Donmi practiced taekwondo, her emotions have been very stable. After all, she has to maintain superficial harmony with Carla for the time being. No matter how much Carla provokes her, she pretends not to care. But Donmi underestimated Carla's provocation. She pretended to act like she was pleasing Donmi in front of her boyfriend. She didn't look aggressive at all. Then, during the conversation, she intentionally spilled the coffee in her hand on the sofa. Carla did this to provoke her mother-in-law to show her true colors. After all, Donmi is very affectionate in front of her son. She doesn't dare to lose her temper because Michael is right in front of her. At this time, Carla also shared her progress in taekwondo. She thinks that with her current strength, she can take on a few people on her own without any problem. Donmi was furious and annoyed when she heard that. Carla knew what her mother-in-law cared about. Not only did she deliberately show her love to Michael in front of her, she even took a poker card and wanted to fight with her. Carla thinks that her mother-in-law playing poker can prevent Alzheimer's. Donmi was even more upset when she heard that. From her subconscious, she refuses to admit that she's an old person. But how could Carla let her go so easily? She purposely accused her mother-in-law of forgetfulness in front of Michael, that she often forgets food in the microwave. Seeing Carla mocking herself in front of her son once again, Donmi was so angry that she left the living room on the spot. This time, she vowed to teach Carla a lesson. Ever since Michael saw his wife with a male colleague at the swimming pool, whenever he takes a shower, he has images of Linda serving someone else. He was worried that his ex-wife would bring him the same kind of clothing that she'd brought to his coworker. The thought of such things put Michael in a state of agony, so he broke into Linda's house on the pretext of seeing her daughter, because she hadn't told the kids about the divorce. In front of Linda, he had to pretend to be in love, and Michael never came home on the pretext of a business trip. That's why the child lamented at the dinner table that he didn't get to see his parents in love. He thinks he's happy because his mom and dad love each other, and they used to kiss each other at dinner. I was surprised not to see them kissing today. Linda didn't want any more contact with her ex-husband. She could only warn Michael not to come to the house again. Now that they've chosen to divorce, there's no need for them to stay together. After that, she left the scene in a huff. But how could Michael let go of such a beautiful wife? He even thought that if he insisted, they could get married again. So Michael asked Linda out again that night. He wanted the woman to remember the time when they fell in love. Then he took out a beautiful bracelet and gave it to Linda, and sincerely apologized to her for being so backward. He explained that this gift was a token of their first date. But surprisingly, Linda didn't reject her ex-husband's gift. She held out her hand and asked Michael to put it on her. Michael then confessed his feelings for his wife. He believed that he hadn't changed his mind about the marriage at all. He was still in love with Linda from the beginning. Linda didn't tell him what he was really doing, but just listened. Just when Michael thought he was on the verge of remarrying his ex-wife, Carla suddenly appeared. It turned out that Linda and her ex-husband had informed Carla in advance before they met that Michael had drunk a lot of wine and asked her to come and pick him up. At this moment, Michael realized that he had been fooled by Linda. Linda finally found her own happiness, but Donmi was tortured by her ex-husband's ghost. In the end, she was tortured and locked up in the hospital as a psychopath. This is the end of the movie. Welcome all interested parties to like and follow. See you next time.